Joined now by former assistant general manager of the Vancouver Canucks. It's our pleasure to welcome back to the show, Mr. Chris Gear. How you doing, Chris?
Doing great, gentlemen. We've had some early action, so it's always fun on trade deadline week.
Yeah, trade deadline week, I think, is maybe a more appropriate title now for the events as we see them. Chris, you've been through this a number of times. Just your general thoughts and impressions of what we're seeing go down here with all these trades over the course of the weekend in advance of Friday.
Yeah, I think it's clear that this year, perhaps unlike some other years, there's a clear delineation between buyers and sellers. I think in the East, you've got 6 teams that they're real powerhouse juggernaut teams. The Islanders were outside of that group and still made a big trade for Horvat. But when you look at Toronto, Tampa, the Rangers, they've all made big deals, and New Jersey yesterday with Timo Meier. So I think there's those teams are really going for it. We haven't seen Carolina make a move yet, but they're likely to step into the fray and do something. So you've really got that juggernaut group in the East. And then in the West, it's been a little quieter. More sellers, I guess, in the West, but I think we'll still hear something else from Colorado beyond bringing back Jack Johnson. And I think a few other teams in the West are likely to do things too. But when you have Nashville and St. Louis looking like they've become sellers, and so I just think that all of that delineation has created more activity, more early activity than perhaps we've seen in other years.
How much do you guys rise and fall on the other deals around the league? Let's say you're not in the market for Tanner Jeannot, but you're in the market for a guy like Tanner Jeannot, and you see Jeannot, and you want to acquire that, but now you've seen what the price tag is. Do you remember getting upset at the other comparable deals around the league going, come on, that can't be the price for X, or maybe somebody that's sold for way too little, and you're thinking, we're trying to sell a guy like that, and that's all we're going to get now?
For sure, absolutely. You run the gamut of emotions when you see those other deals happen. I think somebody like Jeannot is a pretty unique player, a player that has shown the ability to score, but also, muck it up and even fight. He's an RFA, so there's team control involved. There's not too many guys like that. I mean, Tampa did the same thing last year with Brandon Hagel, where a guy that had team control for a number of years. They seem to like to do that. If they're going to, unload a lot of picks, at least they get somebody that is young enough and under team control that they can do something with that long term. But yeah, you look around at the deals and it can either excite you about, okay, now the returns are getting higher and maybe we can pull that off, or they frustrate and depress you that you're trying to sell a guy like that and the market seems to be waning. So all the emotions.
At this stage of the game, if you're a buyer, are you waiting till deadline day? Do you think the price tags are going to come plummeting here come Friday?
It's a tough question. I mean, every deal really depends on the commodity that you have. Like a player like Luke Shen, who the Canucks are obviously looking to move. They've sat him out a number of games. That's a pretty specific commodity, right? A guy who hits everything that moves, a guy who provides incredible leadership, and actually a little more offense this year than we've ever seen from him. So, I still think by waiting, you might have a few teams that are interested and they, decide, okay, if we're going to step up and get him, we better offer a little bit more. But at the same time, a lot of times if, your teams are looking for similar players, and if they don't like what's on the table from one team, they go and get another player, and then you're left holding the bag because you didn't take what was available at the time. So I don't think there's a perfect answer to that. Sometimes waiting is beneficial, and sometimes jumping on what's there early is beneficial.
What did you make of the Kravtsov deal for the Canucks?
Well, I think that was a good move to take advantage of New York obviously wanting to move money to make room for Kane. I'm not 100% sold on Kravtsov. I think, here's a guy who was playing below Jimmy Vesey in the lineup, right? So I'm not convinced he's the next coming, but hey, it's he's obviously a high skill, high pedigree player with lots of talent. and you give up a 7th in Lockwood, which isn't a high acquisition cost. So, why not go for it? He fits the mold of that type of player that if you can, harness what he does have and make him into the type of player you want, then yeah, it's a good bet.
He's a top 10 2018 pick, and there's going to be outliers that prove the rule wrong. But did you ever have like a year post draft where you thought, okay, if the player hasn't shown us X by this date, he's probably not the player for us, and we got to cut bait? At this point, it's 5 years post draft here for Kravtsov.
Yeah, you know what? He has the potential to be kind of a Nikolai Goldobin, right? I mean, that's a guy that when we acquired him from San Jose, tons of talent, tons of vision and playmaking ability. We thought he was going to be a really good fit, and ultimately just didn't pan out because he could never play the full 200-foot game that the coaches wanted and needed him to play. So, sure, there are always guys like that are hugely talented and lots of skill that can never really figure out the NHL game or can never really figure out, how to play in a way that's going to keep them in the league long term. And you hope Kravtsov isn't that guy, but, there are always some. And if the Rangers couldn't figure out a way to get him there, then it could be that the Rangers mishandled it, or it could be that he just doesn't have what it takes. So, obviously, the Canucks are hoping it's the former and that the Rangers didn't develop him well.
9th overall that year. Do you remember where you guys had him, Chris?
Honestly, I can't remember.
Okay. He was a polarizing player. I know he had some helium towards the draft because of the size and the other physical attributes that he had going for him. There was even a thought that he might be able to play center way back when. We noted the tweet of yours from a couple of weeks ago that the Canucks had a couple of paths they could take here with regards to being sellers at the trade deadline. One was to try and get out of LTIR and minimize some of the bonuses that Andrei Kuzmenko is going to get them applied to this year's salary cap as opposed to next year's. They've been besieged by injuries here. LTIR has only fattened. They've got all this cap space available. Do you anticipate they can be trade brokers here? And did you guys ever go into a trade deadline talking about being trade brokers for other clubs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a phenomenon that's definitely increased over the last few years. I mean, there were opportunities that we looked at that never materialized, but I think this year the Canucks are absolutely in a great position to do that. I think the preference would have been or should have been to try to get out of LTIR and use that space for Kuzmenko's bonuses, which the guy keeps, he's going to hit all of them, I think.
Yeah.
So, but obviously that hasn't happened, and the additional injuries have forced them to go a different route. So yeah, they've got, if they put everybody onto LTIR, they've got a ton of space, and so really it's using your space and using cash if they're permitted to do that, to basically acquire draft picks by acting as a broker. And there's still enough deals on the table, and every team that wants to be a buyer is cash strapped, and we've already seen retention and double retention on a couple of deals. So, absolutely, I think that is an opportunity for them, which if they don't seize, and they also are ending up paying Kuzmenko's bonuses into next year, then that's a missed opportunity this deadline.
Do you see any possibility of a trade for term on a guy like Boeser or Miller, given that the term that we have seen moved is either cheap like Tanner Jeannot or it's Timo Meier with 1 year of restricted free agency left? Yeah, I mean, that's obviously difficult, right? Teams aren't very likely to take on big term with what's going on. But at the same time, there's probably a team in the East that's thinking, man, we've got to try and compete here. Or maybe it's a team in the West that thinks, the Eastern teams are going to beat the heck out of each other. And if we can just, improve our team a little bit and get through, because the West is a little weaker this year, then we could face a banged up team, and a player like JT Miller might be the guy that takes us over the hump. So, 7 years times 8 in this market
it's not terrible. Like I know people want to hate on the JT Miller deal, and it is long, and you have to be cautious of 7-year deals or 8-year deals. But 7 times 8 in this market where players are making 8+ pretty regularly, it's not a terrible deal. And so it's maybe not the deal the Canucks should have signed, but for a team that is more in the thick of things or has a closer window, I could see them making a play for JT. Brock's a little different, where he hasn't scored necessarily at the rate that JT has for the last few years, but there's still something there. If Brock gets on a line with some good playmakers, he can still shoot the puck, and I think there's still opportunities there. So I think the Canucks are going to be from now until the very last second, they're going to be working the phones and trying to make stuff happen here.
They say he's injured. Do you believe he's injured?
I don't know. I wasn't aware.
You didn't say yes. You didn't say yes.
Well, actually, I hadn't even heard that. So,
lastly, from me, Chris, we've seen it with Luke Shen, who is yet to be traded, with Vladdy Gavrikov, who is yet to be traded, and Jacob Chychrun, who is yet to be traded. The whole process of holding players out, we know it's to protect the asset, make sure they don't get hurt before you trade them. But in some cases, we're going on a couple of weeks and 5, 6, 7 games where guys haven't played, and some believe that maybe now that hurts the value a little bit.
Full contact game, it's not basketball, right? That's the danger.
Well, I just, what's your sense? Because it's been more pronounced this year than others. What's your sense of good thing, bad thing, and whether or not you think the league might at some point look into this and say, guys, we got to do better?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, from a fan's perspective, I don't like it at all. I mean, you want to see guys in the lineup. From a team and an asset management standpoint, of course, I understand it. The last thing you want is a guy with trade value that teams are interested in going out and taking a puck off the leg and being out. So I do get it. I don't know if the NHL will step in and try to create a rule that prevents that. But, I think it's a small price to pay to see more action, right? Fans want to see trades. Fans want to see things happening around the league. And so, if a player has to sit out a few games, I think when it stretches 2 or 3 weeks, that's a bit much. But, again, small price to pay to get guys moving and for teams to accomplish their goals.
And we hope for more of that. It could be a fun week. Still some names out there. Chris, marvelous stuff. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate this, my friend. Catch up soon.
Anytime, guys. Cheers.